In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, ladies and gentlemen, once again would like to welcome you. Now we start the activities of the 9th Education Conference with the first session titled Global Trends in Developing Education that Adapts to the Future. It will be moderated by His Excellency Dr. Arif Al-Hammadi, Executive Vice President of Khalifa University of Science and Technology in the UAE. Please, Dr. Arif, the floor is yours and we wish you all the best. Thank you. And then from Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation to the ECSSR and His Excellency Professor Jamal Sanad Swedi for granting me this opportunity to moderate this panel discussion, and I would like to thank them for this highly successful edition, 9th edition of the Annual Education Conference under the title Advanced Education in Changing World. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are trying to teach the 21st century generation 20th century knowledge with the tools of the 19th century. In the upcoming 5 years, technology will reshape the future of humanity, and this will make it necessary for educational institutions to change and adapt curriculum.
Examples of futuristic technologies and changing words. Some of the quotations from the Global Economic Report. According to the report, mobile phones are going to be implanted in the human body by 2025. 80% of the human beings are going to be in the electronic space by 2030. 10% of the reading glasses are going to be connected to the internet by 2022. 10% of our clothes is going to be connected to the internet by 2022.
البشر سيكونوا موصلين بالإنترنت.
90% of human beings are going to be connected to the internet, and 21 trillion sensors are going to be connected by the internet by 2020. 10% of cars are going to be autonomous in the United States by 2026. AI is going to be a CEO, a board member. The artificial intelligence is going to take place of the pharmacist and auditor, and 3D printing by 2023 is going to print the first artificial liver by 2024. The UAE is a successful experience in the Emirati school program that is aligning with the international education globe. So for those who reject change in curricula by saying that the such previous curricula created such successful generations, which are the generations of today, if we assume that they are successful, we're going to say that the curriculum of 70 created the generation of 80, and the curriculum of 80 created 90. So who of you would like to study the same curriculum that created a car model 70 or 80? So today is our topic for today is the global trends in developing education that adapts to the future. We start by Dr. Amran Al-Qannan from he's from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, College of Engineering, American University in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. He is a professor at the American University in Sharjah in the UAE, and he received the Bachelor's of Science and PhD from University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. He has extensive experience in education and taught in the University of Minnesota and Pennsylvania College Park. In addition to that, Dr. Umran published over 170 papers in international conferences and journals, his primary research interest being using technology to enhance educational practice. He has designed commercial technology products to support learning. He served as the Chief Technology Officer of an international e-learning company, in addition to the fact that he has helped in the implementation of large-scale real-time assessment systems for primary schools, and has served as the educational consultant to the Asian Development Bank, and has also worked on the technology design and assessment of the evaluation and of various educational environments. Currently, he is engaged in research about applying artificial intelligence AI techniques in education data to improve educational management practices. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess I have 20 minutes. I will try to finish in time. So today I'm going to talk about using emerging technologies for developing or enhancing educational curricula. So real quick in terms of what we're going to talk about today. So what is the curriculum? Just so we are on the same page. Digitization of curriculum. Briefly about the curriculum development cycle, and really I want to talk about some case studies on essentially how technology can help us in enhancing our curriculum development cycle. Okay. So curriculum can be many things to many people, and there are many notions of curriculum in the education area. So there is, for example, curriculum which is on the books, as opposed to curriculum which is taught, curriculum that we actually get tested on, and so on. For this talk, we're going to use this definition. And it's a fairly straightforward definition that says that curriculum is basically a description of, again, what needs to be learned, but also includes all the materials that go along with it. That may include the books, the technologies, even lesson plans, as well as, let's say, teacher training materials. So that's our definition of curriculum. Now, before we can apply technology to curriculum, we kind of have to look at the structure of the curriculum. And actually, if you look at most countries, including the Western countries as well as non-Western countries, and I think UAE curriculum is not any different, they tend to have sort of a hierarchical structure. Some of the domains are different, terms are different, but typically, the structure is very similar. Some countries, for example, like Canada and Australia, add on assessments and learning activities as well. Okay. So just a concrete example, this is from California, from the Common Core curriculum. So, we're all familiar, but this is what they look like. So I have some domain, learning about numbers, and then I have a standard, and then I can have cluster of standards, right? So that's how we describe, what needs to be learned, right? So before we can do anything with it, we need to digitize it. There are many, many proposals for digitizing it. Typically, this is sort of computer geek. So things called XML and JSON and so on and so forth. So I just want to show you an example. I don't expect you to read this, but that's what it looks like, right? So it's just digitized. It's an internal format, so you can actually process it. A couple of things to notice, that there are dependencies. So for example, the adding 100, including adding 2-digit numbers, depends on the student understanding place value and so on. So there are dependencies between different elements of the curriculum, which is important. The second thing is that it's localized. So this particular one is actually for the state of Maryland. And as you know, in the US, there is sort of a common core, which is the federal standard, but then each state has their own particular standards. So this leads to sort of personalization. Okay, so moving on, a very simplified view of the curriculum development process. It's actually, when I say proposed curriculum, it's very complex. It's typically a socio-political process. You look at the needs of the society and you come up with some curriculum. And there is some cycle that actually goes and works on deriving what the actual curriculum is. So we actually start when the curriculum has been proposed and we go ahead and implement it. The curriculum is implemented by the educational administrators and the teachers, obviously, and including the children. And then when we implement it, we observe and analyze. So today we're going to focus on these two boxes which are on the bottom. When the curriculum gets implemented, how do you observe it, how do you analyze it, and then feed it back into the development of the curricular process. Okay? So this is our general approach, and it's very data-driven. So the basic idea is you collect educational data, and what you see on the right are various methods, right? So obviously now the students have iPads, but really IoT, which is Internet of Things, can also be used to collect all sorts of interesting data from schools using sensors. Another one of my favorite one is these digital watches, right? So now actually you may not allow children to have mobile phones in the classroom, but you can certainly allow them to have digital watches. And digital watches have a lot of information that can actually be used to tell things like, what was the mood of the child and so on and so forth. So there's a number of devices that we collect data on. The other thing I'm not going to talk about today is the big data storage, which is on that little green bubble on the right side. Obviously, we need to store data, and this is large amounts of data, so there are technologies for doing that. We have done it, but that's something I'm not going to talk about. So basically, I'm going to talk about the bubble on the top, which is how do you take the educational data, create information. Now, the information is grayed out because we should be doing this anyways, right? So these are our usual reports on, who did what and which school did how well, and the statistics, right? So yeah, we should be doing it anyways, but we want to go beyond, and we need to create knowledge, right? And again, the knowledge can be created really at three levels: at the classroom level, at the school level, or even at the school district level, or at the country level, right? So there are different levels of creation of knowledge to support learning at different levels. And obviously, what we use to create this knowledge is machine learning techniques, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. So this is sort of our general framework. So I just want to give you an example of what everyone is doing these days. So this is just from some school district. This is just information, right? So on the left bottom, what you see are all the curricular items like fractions, numbers, and so on and so forth, and how children are performing. On the right side, you see various schools and districts and what their averages are, and you can compare them, and try to make decisions based on this, right? There you see a radar plot of a particular student and how she compares with all her colleagues, and you can provide specific advice to that student. Nothing fancy here. This is just numbers and statistics and graphs, right? Something we do in Excel every day. So this is just information, okay? And we want to go beyond this, obviously, right? So I'm going to give you sort of 3 case studies of how we do this. So the first one is basically subjective feedback. The second one is a few examples based on student outcome data, and the last one on class observation data. So here's the first example. So here's an idea of how do you get feedback on a curriculum as it's being implemented in real time. An idea would be that I can have a mobile application where I can simply go, oh, today my teacher is teaching X, Y, Z, and I can just rate my teacher, right? Simple idea, right? But imagine collecting all this data and aggregating and trying to figure out what's really going on, which parts of the curriculum are being understood by children and which parts are not being understood, where there are deficiencies. Teachers can do this, and so it's just tagging and answering. What you see, which just look kind of strange, is the little watch and specifically the desk of the child. How can the desk comment on validity of a curriculum? Okay, we want to make it easy, right? So we can instrument these desks and chairs. So for example, if a child is sitting in a class and the teacher is droning on and the child is bored, they can just do this, right? And this can be recorded and immediately conveyed to the ministry if it has to be, right? And you can do this in real time, not very difficult to do, right? Similarly, in a watch, the new Apple Watch, for example, the version 4 actually is very, very good at your monitoring your heartbeat, right? So I can actually figure out the mood of a child in real time and convey it. So I can tie it back to whatever topic was being taught, right? So I'm providing real-time feedback, and the child is not really, saying anything, right? This is sort of more traditional. So, we have a mobile app. You can this is the Common Core curriculum. You can comment, and then you can use all sorts of rubrics to actually comment on a curriculum item. And all the teachers, when they provide their feedback on a particular new textbook or a learning lesson plan or the curriculum itself, it can be accumulated automatically, and then we can run all sorts of analytics on it, right? So collecting data in real time is not an issue at all, and in fact, it's doable, right? So this is just the foundation. Now you can extend that idea to crowdsourcing and funding curriculum backs. What happens with curricula often, and this is another system that we built, is that there are parts of the curriculum that everybody likes, and it's called the long tail phenomenon, and there are parts of the curriculum that no one likes. So there is no teaching material for it. There are no assessments for it. So how do you collect those, right? There are not enough resources. So you can crowdsource it. You can say, oh, just like everybody's familiar with Wikipedia, so this is like the wiki for the teachers, right, who can contribute content. But what if nobody wants to contribute a particular content? Well, I can actually incentivize them by giving them some money, right? So I can crowdfund. So the idea here is that, yes, some content can be crowdsourced, just like how the wiki works. But there is some content that you really have to pay someone, but that's okay, you can crowdfund. So I can go and say, you know what? Nobody has any material on fractions. So I'll, as a person donating money, I'll donate $1,000 for some teachers to go give me that material. And then when the teachers go and give me the material, as they give the material, they get paid for it, right? So it's a classical campaign of crowdfunding, but you're doing crowdfunding now to actually create educational content, right? So this idea of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, both for getting feedback on the curriculum as well as filling in gaps in the curriculum, is really important, okay? So the next example I want to give you is, okay, so we collect a lot of student outcome data. That means essentially results of assessments, and we are doing it more and more, and we can do it more and more because now the children have iPads, right, or they have mobile devices. So actually we can collect data on a daily basis. So how can we use that, right? How can we use that to create knowledge? So I'll just give you one example. So in this case, we took some data from a number of schools. This is performance data on grade 2 math. And then we use some AI techniques to create some clusters. And I'll give you an example to sort of show you what really happens here, right? So here is, on the left side, you see the tablet, which is actually collecting assessment data from the child. So this is grade 2. So, you have to actually sit with the child and ask them these questions. And this is about literacy or learning how to read. And then we map it to, this is a fairly well-known model, which comes from item response theory. So we map all the students' outcome on some normalized scale, right, which tells us about their ability. So minus means that they're perhaps relatively not that able, and plus means that they are able. So once we do that, then we run these AI or machine learning algorithm to cluster the students. And this is an interesting thing that emerged from that data. Remember, so this is, we're talking about literacy or learning how to read. And if you look at these sort of graphs, each dimension, learning, listening comprehension, dictation, concepts about print, these are all dimensions of learning how to read, right? And the curriculum doesn't say anything about it. All it says is, well, okay, here are the 5 things or 6 things that a child needs to learn. But actually, there is a structure. There is a structure in that particular group of students. And what we found was some students look like that, which is the lowest ability, but there is a particular pattern to them, right? And then we see the next one. You can see that they are better at letter name knowledge, and then they are better at reading words. They are good at print, and so on and so forth. And then the third set of students looks like that. So now they have more phonetic awareness. And then we saw this interesting case where it doesn't make sense, right? So it's saying, oh, their reading fluency is really good, the listening comprehension is good, but the reading comprehension is really too high, right? What's going on, right? So this is an anomalous sort of group of students. And what we found out after consulting with the experts in literacy, these children are dyslexic, right? So if you didn't look at the data, you would never know, right? You don't know who these kids are. You would never be able to identify them, right? And then on and on. And so the best ability students look like this, right? So they have good phonetic awareness, good reading comprehension, but they are still lacking in listening comprehension, dictation, and so on and so forth. So here we have actually discovered an underlying structure of this particular curriculum just by looking at data, right? So why is this useful, right? Well, I can know how many of each types of students I have, right? So I have 150 of those, 215 of those, and so on and so forth. So really, from a curriculum perspective, I need to pay a lot of attention to those 214, and I need to create curricular items to help them, go to the next level, right? And again, you can feed it into teacher training and so on, okay? Here is a similar example for grade math. Now, math is different than literacy, and what you see the graph here are the dependency between various topics, okay? And we're running out of short of time, I'll kind of quickly go through the example, but we can do similar things with math as well, right? Not necessarily. And I will skip this because I want to go to the next one, okay? Here's an example in higher education. What you see here is our curriculum, and each circle represents a course. And it's for last 5 years of data, which is about, I don't know, for us, maybe 5,000 students. And what you see here are groupings, right, and the relationships, right? So when you see these have emerged, right? So what you see is these courses like ELE 360, ELE 241, ELE 341 are highly correlated. If a student does well in one, they do well in the other. They depend on each other. But they may not be prerequisites of each other, right? So it's actually giving us a sense that we really have two types of students, the blue ones and then the orange ones, right? And we can use that to change the curriculum. Just to compare, I want to show you how civil engineering looks like, right? So this is computer science and engineering's actual curriculum, how implemented. And this is very colorful civil engineering, very different, right? So they're all over the place, right? Their curriculum is, the actual curriculum is completely different than computer engineering, right? And again, we can feed this, we can see that CVE 2 to 4 is really critical, that course, because a lot of things are depending on it, and we can actually use this to enhance our curriculum as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is class observation. So again, okay, so there's outcome data, but there's other type of data that we collect, right? So one of the most common things that we do to improve our teacher, or part of our teacher development is class observation, right? We go to a class, we go and observe it, and we figure out what they're doing wrong, they're doing well, and then we give them feedback, right? And we train them. Well, it's expensive, right? So these are some of the traditional classroom systems. So again, with technology, why can't I use that data and automatically do what the class observation system does, right? This is a different type of data, but I can certainly feed that into the development process. Obviously, we can use videos, but especially in this culture and many other cultures, people are not very happy when somebody is videotaping them on the fly, but I can use audio, right? So it's easier. So the idea here is, and this is just some cost numbers, using artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, we developed a system which is a very straightforward system. You have an app, and you take the app, you go into your classroom, you turn it on. Every minute, 5 minutes, it records a 1-minute session of what you are doing, just the audio. It goes and actually analyzes that, and at the end of the class, you get a map of what you were doing in the classroom. Not only you get the map, but also your administrator and so on, right? And the cool thing is that this is based on the stalling system. And so the map looks something like this, right? So it tells you what % of the time were you spending in classroom management, what time were you spending in classwork, in lecturing, practicing, and so on. And the arrows show you, so the blue bar is the actually how much time they spent, right? And the other arrow shows what the artificial intelligence predicted. So it's pretty close, right? So in fact, we're getting about 97% accuracy, right? So you can actually use that data to figure out what the teacher is doing in the classroom, okay? So in conclusion, I'll have 50 seconds. Educational data is pervasive, right? And we have both the normal stuff and sort of the abnormal stuff, like the furniture and then the watch and so on, where we can collect data. And really, IoT and big data and machine learning are the three components of any interesting solution that you're going to build in this space, okay? And I just gave you sort of 3 examples, but there are many more. Okay, and I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much. That's the end.
Dr. Imran, we'll leave the questions to the end, so we'll move to the second speaker of the day, الأستاذة فاطمة غانم المري، مدير التنفيذي لتطوير برامج التعليم الطلبة الإماراتيين، هيئة المعرفة.
So, Professor Fatma Ghanem Al-Marri is joining the best private schools in Dubai, improving their happiness in the quality of life for standards of the students and advising academic plans and to upgrade the follow-up of the performance of the UAE students to contribute to the achievement of the UAE 2021 national agenda targets. She leads the Emirati Parents Support Center in order to increase parents' contribution to their children's private education in Dubai. She also seeks to, she also receives, she is a member of the Federal National Council, and she is a member of the board of REACH Association, and it's an association for the women development, and she is aiming at the increasing the support of the parents in the children's journey in the schools, and also enhancing the agency's work through the initiative of Aish Al Arabiya, or Live Arabic, and that is through the development of the 21st century skills is going to be her talk for today. CEO of the Development of the Emirati Student Education Program, Knowledge and Human Development Authority, Ms. Fatma Ghanem Al-Marri.
It's okay. No. I'm fine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Peace be with you all. Good morning. I'm extremely happy to be here with you today, and I'm really thankful to the ECSSR. My topic is about enhancing the 21st century skills. Dr. Arif spoke about the 80s and the 70s and the cars models of the 80s and the 70s, which are of course representing us. I would like to take you to a simple scene in this stage in the 70s. When I was a student at school, I was still in the classroom. I still remember when the teacher of the art teacher asked us to draw the world in the year 2000. So remember, you could just imagine, we were in the 70s, and the year 2000 was a dream that we never expected what would happen in it. So I actually I remember we drew UFOs. And of course, UFOs at that time were very common thing, and we thought that the aliens from outer space are going to invade Earth, and that and that of course was due to Star Wars and aliens and alien attacks and stuff like that. All of the ideas were present in these drawings. We draw cars, we draw flying cars, we draw human beings flying. So I remember that all of these features that we drew in our sketchbooks. So today, when I'm looking back at this memory, I'm asking, did we really change that much? Are we actually flying? Are actually cars flying? Did we invade the outer space, or did the outer space invade Earth? Actually, we travel the whole world only through our PCs, from our phones, from our tablets. So only by one click, we travel across the world. And we actually fly and see everything there is in the world. So we've actually started to invade this space. Aircrafts, the flying cars journey is starting through the autonomous vehicles. So we have some features of what we've imagined. So are we as human beings prepared for this future? Because of course, as Dr. Harif said, 70s cars were for the 70s age, or for the 70s period. Because I would like to say that all of the skills that we have later on are accumulated skills. I remember when first computers were used in schools, we were actually struggling with this new machine. And I remember the DOS program. It was the first one. Now I remember the formulas that we used to use in this program and the complications from the computer. But now when I look at a 1-year-old child is already using an iPhone, or is using a computer and controlling it as if he was born and had already a course while his mom was pregnant of him, that he took a computer course. So that is the development in this new generation. Probably the change for us was with a growing process, and we have to go through it whether we like it or not. But for us as a generation who was born in this previous period, to follow this new trend and cope with this trend in order to help this new generation and cope with this new world.
Now we look forward to the 21st century and to the skills that students should acquire in the 21st century and preparing them to the 21st century. We look forward to preparing our students to be in a different generation than ours. Now, do we have a different perspective than what we used to draw in our notebooks? Schools as a content, schools as humans, the community. Has it changed in that manner? Has it become different to what we had in mind when we were younger? The philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell said, "We are facing a contradicting reality, which is that education has become one of the greatest hinders and obstacles in the field of, or in the face of freedom." These words still summarize all the obstacles in the field of education, which has expanded further in the 21st century, which is the exact opposite of what we expected to happen. We expected the fundamental changes, we expected a scientific revolution, an information revolution that would reshape the world, transform our lives, and transform the society as a whole. Yet, we should admit that we have not reached that scientific revolution or that major change. We still have a gap. The gap in education still persists. The gap between what students learn at schools and what we have in the labor market is different. How can we prepare those students to a different time and to new jobs that differ from the jobs we have been used to? We were simply going to select a certain career and that's it, because that's what we had in front of us. But we never thought of preparing those students for jobs that we are just beginning to see them shaping in the future. In the advent of highly advanced technology, the digital revolution, the 3D printing, all of these technologies require a different set of skills, a different type of knowledge than what we used to teach to our students at schools. This means that we need to have a generation that enhances the 21st century skills. In the world of education, the 21st century skills refer to transformation in the strategies of curriculum and preparing students to be able to meet the demands of a highly changing, dynamic world that is capable of interconnecting cultures, technology integration, and as highlighted by His Excellency the Minister in his presentation, and was highlighted by the professor in the previous presentation, these host of skills that are required by students so they would be able to communicate among different cultures, the technological integration, harnessing the skills of learning and not education, being a lifelong learner, leadership skills, social skills and technical skills, and self-management, how to manage himself or herself, to be able to select what is most appropriate to him and to his community, and what is appropriate to his culture in light of those massive amounts of skills and knowledge. All of this is achieved through the art of shaping education, because every pillar of education should be based on international standards that are surrounded by genuine values. These values should be a very well protected one, to protect those students, the students whom we are preparing for a changing world, a massive world, a world that has all of these skills which are diverse in nature. What about values? What about the human factor that belongs to this society? Given this global perspective, what about the roots that should keep them linked to this society? If you notice, my dear brothers and sisters, now we are facing major challenges, the least of which is the challenge to the Arabic language and the difficulty of learning Arabic language, and how our children have become abhorring and hating the Arabic language. We have led our children to have this feeling because they were instructed by us to learn foreign languages, as foreign languages are the key pillars of the future, without highlighting the value and the status of the Arabic language as part of their national identity and the character of those students. So we have gone with the flow to be able to adapt to change, and in these accelerating wars, and we have neglected this subject as teachers and as educators, and now we are paying the price. We're paying the price while talking about the Arabic language as a challenge. At a challenge that we should be able to addressing to regain the status of the Arabic language among our students. Preparing students for life skills, so to prepare them for jobs that have not yet existed, preparing them for a new world. According to the Global Forum of Education in 2016, 65% of students who will receive basic education will be engaged in jobs that have yet to exist, have not been introduced yet, that do not exist yet. So these skills that our students are learning nowadays are the ones that will prepare them for the future, to be ready for the future and to be ready for jobs that do not exist yet. Education should focus on those jobs and envision those jobs, and thereby introduce this host of skills that are necessary for students. The Future Shaping Institute in Abu Dhabi issued a very important topic about the future 2040. The future 2040, it's like putting in front of us an image of the community in 2040. 157 common jobs in 2040, and the call for our students should benefit from those jobs and learn from them. This institution shaped in front of our eyes a clear vision of what kind of jobs we can expect in 2040, and it will be for the children born in 2010 who are now studying in primary schools. So these jobs, the jobs that we have now, many of them will vanish in the future. Automation and technology will have a major impact on the current status. Robots that we used to draw images of and thought of them as aliens will be the ones that are part of everything now. They will dominate the future scene. Yet, the fact that we should be aware of is that those robots and this technology will not eradicate jobs, but they will generate new jobs. So when we talk about technology and how it replaces human beings, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Technology, as highlighted in this regard, will generate and will create new jobs for humans. This is what happened. And according to the McKinsey report, what happened in the United States of America over the past 25 years, new jobs emerged that did not exist before. Due to technological revolution, they had IT jobs, classifying software, software development, management of information systems, and so on. So all of these jobs will be generated in the future, and we need to prepare our students for them, inshallah, so they would be, God willing, able to handle them. Please allow me to highlight an experience that we have introduced in the KDHA, which provides a brief example of preparing to the future. In Dubai Future Foundation, the Dubai 10X initiative was introduced to underscore the status of Dubai to be highly advanced. Within 10 years, it will be more advanced than all of the countries of the world in critical sectors. Here we'll focus on all sectors. We'll focus on the sector of education. The initiative of the KHDA was through a HAL initiative. A HAL initiative aims to introduce a new educational model that enables students to study at traditional schools and to follow up at any other school, in the sense that a student can study in more than one school, and they can study and work. They can work in more than one job, and they will be counted as studying hours. So a student would be assessed in a way that is entirely different from conventional assessment. The entire world will be like an open school to students, so they would learn and enrich their expertise. Students will have the freedom to individualize education, in the sense that they would study according to their own needs and according to their own capabilities. And this will be this experience of life will be counted for them just as academic hours, credit hours. So they can study and work, and this work will count as a study. They can study in a school in Abu Dhabi and study simultaneous in another school in Dubai, and this will be counted for him as grades and as school test results. They can study in their home country and complete the rest of the study in Dubai. They can work and learn a skill or an activity, a voluntary activity, and it will still count as a subject with grades. So students will design their own curriculum. This is based in collaboration with schools and investors. We have introduced the initial stage of this program in collaboration with a number of schools, and thank God the experience has started and will be further assessed, and it can be expanded or modified in a way that, as we said, will empower students and let the community become the open door school class for them. This will be more suitable for elder students as they can study and work. It will be suitable for students who can study from home. It will be suitable to gifted students and students of determination. It is designed to accommodate all types of students. In conclusion, I think I have only 2 minutes left. I believe that the students' ability to obtain highly technological skills that we are keen to instill in our students to empower them in the upcoming period is an intuitive concept, yet empowering them to be highly innovative and to have a spirit of entrepreneurship and enjoy a high quality of life is very important. And the objective of education will be to enable and empower our students in our new world to learn with new skills and new tools, life skills, and how to live in peace with themselves and with others. Thank you, and peace be with all of you.
شكرا للأستاذة فاطمة.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. The next speaker is Professor Hiba Daridi. She is the interim dean of the Graduate School of Education at the American University in Cairo, in Egypt. Professor Hobart Daridi is currently the interim dean of the Graduate School of Education at the American University in Cairo. She obtained a doctoral degree in the Science of Education from the University of Birmingham in the UK. She is now leading this STEAM education initiative as an international approach to an interdisciplinary learning model. She was the PI of the Bilingual STEAM Education Project, which was funded by British Gas, and the co-PI for the School and University Partnership for Peer Communities of Learners, which is a project funded by an REMSUS Plus. Professor Daredi's research focuses on finding the means to provide for quality teaching and learning. Her research interests focus on teacher education in general and science teachers in particular. She has published in the areas of STEAM and STEM education and education for sustainable development, ESD, using education and technology in teaching and learning, teaching portfolios, continuing professional development, and other areas. She developed, designed, and presented the first Arabic massive open online course, MOOC, in STEAM education, hosted by the electronic platform Idrak. Please, the floor is yours. Peace be with you.
To be with you today as you are actually celebrating even the year of Zaid and a lot of emphasis on education in general. My talk today will emphasize on one of the key aspects as you are celebrating and looking into STEAM education for building minds for the future. Since there's so many in the audience who are interested in education in general, and some of you are actually teaching or have been in different positions, I'd just like you to take a few seconds into reflecting on your teaching experiences in general, specifically focusing on the content that you teach and maybe the teaching strategies that you're using in your classrooms or you've been exposed to, and also the roles and responsibilities of your students as they come into your classroom environments. Have this mental image in your mind just for a few seconds. And I'll take you to another way of looking at classroom experiences. What do classrooms look like, or what do classes look like in general? I'll show you a couple of experiences, some that might relate to what you have right now imagined in your mind, and some are a bit far away from that, but let's share what I have here. This is a classroom experience a long time ago in the 30s. And as my colleagues have mentioned earlier, just today, looking back at educational systems in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and today. This is a picture coming from a Libyan school, and you can sense and see how the students are seated, how the arrangement in general has been looked at in terms of a learning environment. Moving to another country, still black and white, still old, a little bit more into the higher education system. There's not much of a change there. But as I take you to a recent photo in Egypt, actually, again, you can still see that the same learning environment is there, the same seating arrangements, and the same isolation that students, as they're seating in this particular way, can actually envision and show us a little bit of interaction generally. So with these two images, the one that you have mentally developed for yourself and your understanding and your experience about teaching, and the pictures that I showed you, I'd like to move on to two main aspects to share in specific. One of them that was previously mentioned this morning by His Excellency, the Minister of Education, and also referred to my dear colleagues. It's the fourth industrial revolution that I'm really, really interested to know more about, and to use it as we pave our way to education. The second is about teaching with the brain in mind, and I'll come to that in a few seconds. So, looking back again looking at the fourth revolution, let's just show a little bit about how it actually takes us from the first industrial revolution as we move on forward. So can I have the So the video actually raised an important question. I think that question has been asked several times, even though we're still at the first session this morning in this conference. It's about how can we equip and align the educational system with every single thing taking place. We've seen from the video that there's a lot of transformation taking place in terms of technology and in terms of businesses, but are we ready in the educational system to align with that and to cope with that as well? Now let's move on to another point, which is about the brain-based research. And it's very fascinating to know that the 3 pound that we have on top of our shoulders and we carry every day, and we need to unravel what's in this black box. How does it function? And it seems to be a very sophisticated, computerized organ that we need to take into account as we're looking at educational systems, more or less. How can we get the brain to function in the best way possible? And how can we pave the way in the educational systems to make this brain come back to its big and utmost functionality in general? One of the things that as I'm even speaking right now, it's good to know what's happening in the audience brains as I'm even speaking up and my voice, how it's actually translated in your brains. So let's have a look. Let's have a look. Just as I was speaking and these images are showing, this is exactly what's happening in your own brain. There's a sparkle, there's a stimulus, there's an electric flow taking place. There are neurons that are trying to connect and make sense of my voice as I speak right now and as you're seeing the images. And this has actually been captured by different disciplines and neurosciences and physicists and psychologists just to try to identify how the brain functions and to put this into specific images. You might have heard of MRI as a way of capturing the brain activity. There's also the PET scan, as it shows right in front of you right now. And as you can see, there are different areas that are highlighted in red. These highlights actually show where the brain is more active and which region of the brain shows the activity as you walk, as you see something, as you hear, as you think, and as you try to go into a situation where you need to remember. All of this, if you take into account as educationalists how the brain functions, and also in terms of how we need to align this with the fourth industrial revolution, we definitely need to start to think about how the educational systems respond in general. And the brain, fascinatingly, is an organ that is a social organ. It functions much best in a social context, and it makes sense of information if it's tied together and it's linked together and it's put into a meaningful context and a situation. So what's happening globally? Let's have a look. So global changes did take place in different countries, and one of the main things that we'd like to have a look and zoom into a little bit more is how they use different concepts such as multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. They were actually looking at the brain and how it functions, and if you particularly try to make sense and link disciplines together, because once you make the linkages, once you try to provide information that is meaningful to the learner, the whole situation changes altogether. So emphasizing a little bit more about the multidisciplinary that you can bring about in an educational system, if the focus was particularly on a project, and you try to tailor the different disciplines to respond to the needs in terms of knowledge and skills that fulfill the requirements of the project. So this would be a multidisciplinary type of approach. You can take it a little bit further where you start to see a little of a blur, a tight blur, an overlap between the disciplines, but they're done on a specific purpose. So you link a little bit more. They're not in their silos anymore. They're not in their separated places, but now they make more sense, and that will be more of an interdisciplinary approach. The fascinating one would actually be the transdisciplinary approach, where you can hardly make sense of any specific color, because now there are no disciplines. They're all blurred, they're all linked. They're linked even in the way that you cannot identify which concept is coming from which discipline. And they serve a specific purpose. They are the ones where they integrate so tightly that they look into trying to solving problems. And it turns out that the globe, locally and regionally, there's so many challenges that we face. There's so many interdisciplinary aspects and global challenges in terms of health, engineering in general, energy, how to preserve that, water reservation. There's so much that we can do if we were to think about bringing the disciplines together. Now, the question would always be valid in terms of how can we mind the gap in terms of removing the silos, removing the disciplines, because there seems to be much that can be done, and bring them together in terms of trying to make sense and resolving what could have been the educational challenge. One of the things that we can do and might think of doing is just by this. This video is actually taken from the trailer that I used when I was developing the first Arabic MOOC, the massive open online course. It's hosted on Idrak platform, and through the 2 runs of the MOOC, I managed to get more than over 33,000 participants just to know a little bit about what STEM education is, what STEAM education is, and how we can bring about change by this interdisciplinary approach in general. So the video actually right now also raised a couple of questions and a couple of facts in terms of the future jobs that we don't know of right now, and how we can actually prepare our students as we speak about educational systems this day. There's a lot of emphasis as well in terms of looking at the role of the teacher. And just a couple of minutes ago when I showed you the pictures from different countries, some in the Arab region, some elsewhere, it definitely shows a major change and a major transformation of what the teacher can do and should be doing. So the teacher is no more the expert. Do not wait for somebody to come and lecture, somebody to speak and transmit information. If we were to think about making changes to students, to learners, this is not the way. The way where we can see somebody come into the classroom to facilitate, scaffold and help, and most probably also co-learn. And this is a different paradigm that we need also to change in terms of the teacher. Learning can very much happen. Learning can take place from the students. It does not have to be from the repertoire of knowledge that the teacher brings into the classroom situation. So with this in mind and looking about all these various aspects and questions, I think now we need to think about how we can move on forward. How can we make education more creative? Who would do that? How can we do that? And what do we need to do? Emphasizing again the shift between, or the shift from disciplines in their silos, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary if we were to go beyond a discipline altogether. I don't want to be worried about the moves and the stages and the steps we might be taking forward. And I don't want to be pessimistic either. So the idea, if we were to make even small steps, but they are thought of very cautiously, we can actually bring about change. Sometimes we worry about change. Teachers and educationalists might be very much resistant to change. But if we take that gradually, so if we want to think about making change, we don't need to jump altogether to the transdisciplinary, but it's fine to think about bringing 2 disciplines in a situation, 3 disciplines in a situation, and then move on gradually from that step onwards. So what are the possibilities that we can have? We can have STM, and I'll talk about that, and as you can see, we can emphasize one area and maybe shrink a little bit, or we don't need to put the same emphasis in another discipline. We can bring in one of the concepts that's very well known. Actually, this is the starting point of the interdisciplinary type of approach, STEM. We can think about another way, which is STEAM. There's more expansion, there are more disciplines coming here together to the forefront. And what you are using here in the UAE is STREAM. And we'll come to that also in a second. So one of the things just to look about in terms of what each letter stands for, so I think it's kind of already makes sense. The S stands for the science, the T for the technology, and we emphasize a lot in our talks about technology, E for engineering, and it might also be ESD, the A for the arts, although I've known the University of Purdue is using the A for agriculture. And the M for maths, and other places might be using the M for medicine. So what is ESD? ESD is Education for Sustainable Development, and I'm bringing it to the forefront, so we're also cautious about what our planet in general is running through in terms of danger and challenges. Unfortunately, on your left-hand side, this is a scary situation. It's if we keep on consuming what we are doing right now in terms of energy, water, and all our various resources, that doesn't look like a pleasant picture we want to move on to. Think about moving to the right-hand side. This is a more brighter, more conservative picture, and definitely with a care and involvement more of education sustainable development. So one of the models that I propose on a personal, professional level is to expand from STEM to STEAM Power 2, and that actually brings in the STEAM, the science, technology, the engineering, and the maths, and the arts, but it also adds to it the other E, which is education sustainable development, that makes it more sense. And these are just a couple of the challenges we might be facing locally and globally, which education definitely needs to emphasize more on. So, having this in mind, the classroom setting might look different. This is a very cheerful one. I hope we will see more happy faces in our classrooms with our learners. This is just one of the examples of how we can bring about disciplines that emphasize on one specific core. Transportation is a huge issue in Cairo. I'm glad it's not here. So that can be one of the projects or one of the ideas or one of the problems you try to get your students to get involved in. But you can't get your students involved and get them to think out of the boxes unless we as teachers start to communicate and start to collaborate differently. So bringing in interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary or even multidisciplinary approaches, whether it's STEM, STEAM, STREAM, whatever the wording or the acronym you want to make, we really need, as educationalists, to come together, to collaborate, to brainstorm, to do the planning, but for schools and educational systems to cater for this as well, to give them incentives, to give them reward, to provide for space and time for this to take place. Remember the dull pictures that we saw a couple of minutes ago? These are now probably new pictures of students where they're in a more enjoyable learning situation, they're having fun, hands-on, collaborating, presenting, interacting, using all the various skills that we mentioned earlier in this presentation and from my colleagues as well. So the how and the who and the what can definitely emphasize on the 4 C's, the collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, and communication. Have this in mind as you're developing and you're making your changes to the educational system. And again, moving on to whether it's STEM, STEAM, STEAM Power 2, it's a way forward and definitely a way that is needed to get the brain to function at its utmost and to also cater and to align with everything taking place as the 4th Industrial Revolution. So how this can be done, I'm sharing a couple of pictures right now from students' projects. I'm actually coming from the Graduate School of Education at the American University in Cairo, and we do offer a program, actually a diploma in STEAM education. We had one of the days as an event where students finalized their projects and they showcased it. This is a project looking about the hand, and it looked at different aspects in terms of developing a model for the hand, bringing disciplines, engineering, design, looking at the biology in terms of the muscles, the nerves, and how they can make that function. There was another project presented looking at cinema and how we can bring about concepts related to engineering, filming, design, maths. And another project looking at shadows, how light transfers, 2D drawings, and persuasive writing, again, adding a lot to do with disciplines. So if we are to think about the way forward, we need to ask the right questions, to probably brainstorm and find the right answers, and hopefully come back together with a more collaborative, interdisciplinary approach for the future of our country and the Arab region in general. Thank you so much indeed.
نشكر المتحدثين اليوم
Thank you for all the speakers for the first session, and now we open the floor for discussion. I will.
Very interesting presentation today. I'll start with a question to Dr. Amran. You did talk we did talk today about the jobs changing, and we talked, okay, we have students in my university that have designed an automated pharmacy where the person goes to the pharmacy, put the doctor's bill, and then it gets out all the medicine that he wants. Today we don't find any receptionist, and when you go to the mall, that receptionist doesn't exist anymore. Those walls available where you click where you want to go and show you the direction. So we can see this change. But I go back to the teacher's job. Today, if I have an email and it have a spam, some kind of intelligence detect that you have one word and trash that email. We have softwares we use in the university today, Turnitin, which compares the students' submissions and find plagiarism. So are we going to find something that is going to replace the assessment for the students soon? Some artificial intelligence that can assess the different students and give us results instead of the teacher doing that?
Okay, it's a very good question. So I think if you ask any teacher, and it's all the way from the level of a primary teacher to us as professors, what we hate the most is grading or assessment, right? So we all want that process to be automated. I think what's happening now is that things change, right? So if we were to go with the old system where you have all these multiple choice questions and you have a fixed curriculum, those things can be automated because you obviously can automate the design. But now we are actually shifting more and more towards project-based learning and problem-based learning. So actually the assessment mechanisms are becoming more qualitative. And so the answer is yes and no. So I think typically for machine learning, things which are uniform, like the old style of assessments, yes, it's automatable. And in fact, a lot of it is automated. But where we are moving in the new way of teaching our children is becoming more qualitative, and therefore I think we will be stuck with grading them for a long time. Yeah. Okay.
I'll open the floor for the questions. We have one question in the back there.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr.
Peace be with you. Dr. Abdullah Al-Amri, God bless all of you. Actually, I would like to praise what was said by Ms. Fatma Ghanem Al-Mirri, and I believe that she has touched upon a critical point. Now when we talk about the Arabic language, all the nations of the world develop while keeping their own language, their own identity. The other scope of knowledge is an assistive one. And I'm saying so because the first position I assumed in the Ministry of Education was the head of the languages section We used to teach Arabic, English, and French. We are not underdeveloped. We are highly developed. We respect all cultures. At the beginning of the 90s, and I was at the supervisor of the PhD, who was Professor Basil Dobas, an American in the field of criminology. He asked me to submit a research paper on the first chapter and to speak in front of people in English. And I told him, I'm a researcher. I'm ready to write a research paper, but I'm not willing to speak in English. There is a massive difference between writing in a language and speaking in another language. I told him, my English language is very good, but it may not enable me to speak in front of an audience or a crowd. He said, what language else do you know? I told him, I speak Arabic fluently and English, and I speak French to some extent, and Persian language, and Indian language, and Pakistani language, and Malabari language. And he said, you are 100 times better than me because I speak only English. And if you don't master your mother language or mother tongue, then this is a disgrace for you. But if you don't speak another language, this is nothing to be ashamed of. I attended one of the majlises of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, and there was an American. Please, the question. I'm just saying. I'm commenting on the importance of the Arabic language. Sorry, if you have a question, please. The intervention is clear. Thank you, Your Excellency. So the American guest, was a Muslim who lived in the UAE, and he could not speak Arabic in his whole life. So in the majlis of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, he said, I will speak in standard Arabic for the first time. If you don't master your own language, he doesn't deserve the life he lives. Thank you. Peace be with you. Would you please introduce yourself? I will not take much time. I have a very simple intervention. Please, a question, please, because others want to ask questions. Doctor, this is a question in an intervention. It is very important. Please, quickly. Okay, quickly. I'm in the I've been in the UAE for 15 years. I had a BA, and now I'm at the beginning to become I'm about to become a professor. Thank God first, and this country, thanks to the sheikhs and to the young people and to everyone in the UAE. My name is Saifuddin Abu Nahal. I'm a professor in law and corporate development. The UAE in education has reached the best and the highest levels in the whole world. And I have just 3 simple points. At the corporate level, as schools and universities, we have the best schools and universities worldwide. At the field of resources, we have the best resources. At the level of teachers and researchers, we are classified as a country that has a number of wonderful researchers and teachers. What about the students and learners? Why the outcome is weak in education, despite that we have 3 of the most and best resources for education in the UAE. We have strong resources, excellent schools, and wonderful teachers and professors, and the students would like to learn, yet the deliverables are weak. Through my work in 3 universities in the UAE, I realized a certain outcome. The problem is not in the resources and not in schools, and the problem is not with students. The problem is that we have not oriented the professor or the expert or the teacher in how to transfer his knowledge to students. We need to reach a level where we teach scientists and professors who have reached this high level for generating knowledge. Please slow down and learn, or take into account the way of delivering your knowledge, all this massive knowledge, to the students who are in need of this knowledge. I hope we can have a certain mechanism to be implemented for teachers and experts that will focus on a simple point. How do you transfer your knowledge to students? And you should be standing in front of yourself honestly to know that you are not just reflecting knowledge. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please, the floor is yours. In 15 seconds, please. We still have 3 more questions. I would like to thank Dr. Hiba for her wonderful presentation and highlighting the concept of integrating education in life. She highlighted that this experience was implemented in the Arab Republic of Egypt. What is the greatest hindrance that you have faced in Egypt, and how did you overcome it? Was it about the environment at school or the level of teachers? Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. I'll answer in Arabic. We still have the same problem. The change in education requires great efforts and many joint and collaborative efforts. And one of our colleagues may have started talking about how we can reach an excellent level of education. Teachers are very important, and if we don't qualify them enough and we do not empower them enough, we will speak a lot on paper and in theory, but the implementation will be quite difficult. In the Reformat Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, I'm quite happy to be part of this wonderful conference which aims to develop education in the United Arab Emirates. I've heard a lot about this topic and I would like only to highlight my concern about developing knowledge and education through technology, so that at the end of the day we would do without the teachers. This is really quite scary for me, because leaving students, especially at the first initial stages, in this amazing amount of knowledge, and with reference to the things that may turn them into criminals, and without having in front of them a role model as represented in a teacher who can instill values within those generations and the real culture. This is just, I just wanted to highlight my fear and my concern in this regard, and I want to highlight that teachers represent the foremost element that we should focus on when developing education in the United Arab Emirates. I cannot really imagine, for instance, that a strategic research center would be highly evolved without a strong personality like the personality of His Excellency Dr. Jamal Sanad Swedi. This is an example that we should really pay attention to. Teachers should be the key pillar of the educational process. We need to assist them with new technologies. As for reliance on technology only, this is a threat to future Arab generations. Thank you. Thank you very much for your intervention. Please, Professor.
Very much for that was a really good comment. And I think we often forget that really the purpose of education is to make good human beings. And I think your point about character building and being a role model is really important. But we believe that what technology will do is free up the teacher to play that role. So rather than teachers spending their time doing manual tasks like grading and so on and so forth, we free up the teacher. So teacher, we believe, especially in primary education and up to secondary education, has to be present, but the role will change. And they will actually spend more time doing character building and being a good role model. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
إن دور المدرس راح يكون هو facility.
The teacher's role will become more of a facilitator who will be utilizing technology to develop education. However, there is also a comment on what I've said. The initiative of a HAL, if students can create their own curriculum with the ethical framework that we in the community can utilize, and how can the community really put the framework for their values? They don't really introduce the educational themselves, but they select the skills. For example, as a student, they may have an activity. This activity, they selected this activity, and they believe that this activity is an added value to him, and this will be calculated for him. So there is an establishment. Of course, there is an establishment that does this roadmap. Yes, and this is assessed because the assessment process is different from the normal one. It will be based on this curriculum. We say it is a new curriculum which has different facets from different levels. As for the status of teachers, I believe teachers will continue to exist and play their role. Now we see a major competition between teachers and technology. Students resort to technology more than they resort to the teachers because technology gives them the data in an accurate and swift manner, and teachers, we need them to be a role model in this field. They are the ones who represent the individual to whom students turn, not just for information, but as a role model, and how they can be in the future. And technology, as you have kindly highlighted, Doctor, will facilitate the teacher's role in administrative aspects. Please, for the sake of time, we have a question, Professor. Thank you very much. Actually, in terms of competitiveness, the UAE is number one in the from among 139. She's the first country on the Arab level. As for competitiveness, digital education, the UAE has not really achieved an elevated status with regards to reliance on digital technology or the digital developments. This is an aside in this conference that really highly encouraging. I learned a lot from the presentations by the important professors and the speech of His Excellency the Minister of Education. All of them focus on the same scopes of development and collaborative learning and so on. However, on the other side, when we talk about industrial revolutions today, now we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Have we talked about how to protect humans from the impact of those industrial revolutions, the successive revolutions from the first one and now to the fourth one? All of us seek to understand what is going on in terms of those industrial revolutions, but has these sciences, which are in a state of revolution, have they managed to protect the people from diseases, from the tense environment, which is always tense, and from the global warming? Did these scientists, or could they protect humans from all of this? I say there has to be another aspect, a more humane aspect of those revolutions, and our conferences should really focus on the other side for protecting human beings. Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor. Now, to one last question, please. Peace be with you. My name is Nama Abdurrahman Mansouri. I'm the director of the Blind People's Services in Zaid Higher Organization. I would like to thank you very much for holding this highly important conference, and God willing, everybody will benefit from in this domain. My question is addressed to Ms. Fatima. With regards to the experience that you have conducted, that students can register the curriculum in Dubai and still study in Abu Dhabi. What are the criteria that you have used in terms of determining students' level, and when did you start this new initiative? Thank you very much. It is still a new experience. As I told you, Ms. Nama, It is one of the 10x, Dubai 10x initiatives for the experimental implementation now. We have a couple of students we started in Indian schools, and according to this actually was initiated to resolve the problem of how to the project was initiated. A number of staff members, let's say ministers, any minister or any one living having his work in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or any other emirate, wherever they work. So students are either with them in this emirate or in another emirate. So we started from this domain. How can we, as parents who work in another emirate, and move to that emirate? But if we move to another emirate, I can still guarantee that my son will have a place at school. So we established this collaboration between the schools in Abu Dhabi and Dubai to ensure that we have the same curriculum. We are talking about private schools. So students are registered at both schools.
مثل ما قلت قد يكون بنظام كلي أو بنظام جزئي هذا المشروع، فيداوم الحصص في المدرسة اللي في أبو ظبي والحصص الثانية في يوم يكون في
So that could be a holistic approach or a portrait approach. So the student would probably attend some of the classes in Abu Dhabi, the other classes in Dubai, according to his father's work. So the evaluation of this project is not completed yet because now we're in the pilot phase. So I have a question for Dr. Hiba. Do you have cases as students in the from the people of determination in your project for like people with sight challenges or any other? Actually, we don't have any of the people of determination enlisted in our project, but in general, the university is doing everything in its power to cope with their needs. So in a continuous developing world, in a continuous technological changes, I would like to conclude with what the doctor said, that the Arabic language is very important. The ethical values in UAE was inserted in the curriculum, and also in the universities we teach the engineers or the engineering students the ethics of engineering, and in medicine students we teach them also the ethics of medicine, and we should never ever forget the values and ethics that is very important in the development of the human beings. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I hope you a pleasant day. Thank you very much for all of the speakers in the first session. Now we leave you for a 10 minutes break, then we come back for the second session of the conference. Thank you very much.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, please take your seats, and the new session is going to start shortly. Our honored guests, we resume the second session of the conference with the title of the UAE Education Strategy and Requirements of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The panel chair is His Excellency Marwan Al-Sawaleh, Undersecretary of Academic Affairs for Public Education, the Ministry of Education, the United Arab Emirates. Let's welcome His Excellency Marwan. The floor is yours. Your Excellencies, Your Highnesses, peace be upon you all. I am honored in the very beginning to welcome you in this session of our conference, which is tackling a very important topic, and it's considered and we have titles of very important challenges that we are going to tackle regarding the challenges facing the education systems, regarding also foreseeing the future in order to elevate its readiness. I would like to thank, on behalf of all of you, the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research organizes this annual conference. Today, we discussed 3 papers presented by specialists regarding creativity, innovation, technology, AI, and learning outcomes and future jobs. When we are talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution, we are talking about deep transformations that happened and others to happen about what we are learning and what we should learn and how should we go on with our lives and work. The Ministry of Education, within its strategic plan, took the consequences and repercussions of the 4th Industrial Revolution into consideration, and we focused on the diversification of skills and paying more attention to skills for information and also learning the smart learning and other skills as well. Yet there is much more to do, so allow me, while discussing these papers, to ask several questions. The 4th Industrial Revolution threatens the nature of the traditional skills that the education systems are planning to achieve. For kids now, they need to know about automation, AI, and that requires continuous work on elevating the skills and relearning the skills because the nature of jobs is extremely different. Therefore, these skills are no longer long-term used. So the skills that students need in order to be much more agile in the work environment. So how can we redesign our educational systems and how to adopt other effective forms in education and learning that enable students to cope with the rapid changes in the science and technologies society and from the marketplace as well, workplace. So now allow me to introduce the speakers of today. Dr. Professor Taysir Sobhi Yamin, Director General of the International Center for Innovation in Education, Germany, and Dr. Michel Pasquer, Associate Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, College of Engineering in the American University of Sharjah, and Dr. Nisreen Hamad, Advisor to the Minister of Education, Office of His Excellency Minister of Education. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Taysir to present his paper. Good evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Marwan, for this presentation. I believe that the questions that you posed are the global questions that are being asked in most of the educational systems so that it would work on finding the proper answers for such queries and questions. So my paper today, it's going to be about innovation, education, and productive thinking. The lecture is going to be in Arabic.
Only speak English, so you will find the slides in English, but I would like to talk in Arabic today. بالنسبة ل
As for the 21st century or creative education, we need into achieving the aims and goals. And of course, each education system would aim into achieving such goals, first of which is political stability, economic growth, scientific enrichment, cultural enrichment, psychological health and the general prosperity of any society, in addition to paying attention to the differences between the individuals and their mental health, in addition to expressing the direction of the community. So that means that creative or innovative education, innovation in education is a necessity. That means that when we speak about innovative education, we have concepts that we need to tackle. The first one is educational excellence. These concepts, as you can see here, some of the systems provided as either synonyms or work plans. For example, the culture of excellence is existing in so many societies. Also, giftedness has its own definition. Also, the creativity and innovation culture is the core of this event, and I'm going to tackle it more deeply. And as for talent and being special, especially if it's if it's only related to the academic talent, it's also something that we need to tackle. So when we talk about innovation education, we need to take the interdisciplinary approach from different subjects. So that means that innovation education is based on the integration of the various knowledge approaches. So the final point is knowledge management and how to manage the capabilities and talents in the communities, and that's a very important topic. But as for the previous topics that I mentioned, I'm not going to tackle them all, but I'm going to tackle only 3 points. Potentially gift is the gifts of the students who have hidden mental abilities. And we, of course, deal with them in a different group of projects and services. Others, there are also potentially creative. That's another concept, and there's also potential capabilities. And of course, that was explicitly explained in a book called Gifted and Talented Education, issued in UK. It has 3 chapters that tackles these 3 concepts in details. We noticed in the first session that we talked about students in general, but I would like to tackle it from the point of distribution, the natural distribution. It shows that students are developed or divided into 3 sections. And of course, the midsection contains the majority of students. And when we talk about innovation education, that means we need to make some sort of differentiation, which is the reconstruction of the educational subjects in a way that copes with the potentials of the students, because we have average students and talented students. So education should, of course, focus on the right side for those students who are special, who are talented, in addition to because they have additional features that differentiates them from other regular students. So what does that mean? It means that we need, for any authority or any country would adopt the creative education to have definitions, tools, dynamics, and norms, and also use the dynamic norms for the student diagnosis as well. In addition to identification process, also there is a very important point, which is the public law to organize this the whole phase. If we are going to work into innovation education, we need to find the target group that we are going to work with. And of course, this group is the groups with potential intelligence. For the regular students, we need to maximize their potential in order to get the best that they can offer from their capabilities. But for the talented students are the ones that we need to invest in. That means that innovation education has its own components and a number of elements that needs to be existing in it. So I'm not going to mention them all, but the first one is about legislation for innovation education. And the second point, which is the national agenda, I'm going to leave it till the very last slide because it's a very important point that we need to learn about the different elements that shows or that forms the national agenda. So I'm going to basically focus on the innovation deals, what innovation deals with, and how can we identify such special students. When we talk about we need new ideas, new methods of use, new products, and so on and so forth, we notice that there are two directions, either to think about knowledge producers or to think about the knowledge consumers, because we have these two categories. The knowledge producers, actually the knowledge consumers are the majority of students, which is in the middle section or below. But the knowledge producers are the students with very high intellectual capabilities that we can invest in order to make them knowledge producers. And that's the goal of innovation education. That means that there should be a matching process between innovation education and the target group. This is one of the books that have been launched or issued recently about innovation education. If you're interested, you can get your copy. Now, when we talk about high intellectual capabilities, of course, there are people can study these students from neuropsychology prospect, from psychology prospect, but I'm going to talk about the Sorbonne University. They have their own studies related to the mechanism of the brain mechanism. Actually, we can divide it into two processes. The first one is divergent exploratory thinking, which means that human being is born with a certain level of exploration. Why? Because the ability to explore enables the human being to obtain information, ideas, events, be aware of what is happening around them, therefore form the knowledge structure for this person. The second process is convergent interactive thinking, which means to use the already existing information into producing new knowledge or to developing the existing knowledge. So these are the two processes. Therefore, the understanding of the psychologists and the educators, understanding of the brain mechanism is easy and clear to understand, easy to invest in order to activate the exploration process and the integration process in order to help the human being to reach the utmost level of identification or understanding and learning. Now we can find this through finding catalysts or things to intensify
التعامل مع المثير عند
to motivate their thinking, of course. So we can also find it through gathering a number of elements in a certain context so that they would come up with a different production of knowledge. So the production of creativity is, the definition of creativity is the ability to produce work that is both new and context appropriate. But in physics and technology, we have a robot, we have a product. Of course, we can't really say that a robot is a creativity, is a creative production, but it's actually a product resulted from a creative process of thinking. So scientists reach in this in the excellence and the in the excellence teaching. They found that there are 4 levels of creativity. The first one is mini C or C minor. There is students in kindergarten. We can discover that whether they have this potential or no. Then we have little C from grade 3 up until university. So in little C, we can find through the students' performance to understand or know whether they have these hidden potentials. And then we have professional C, whether, for example, a person working in an institute or a certain institution or organization, we find that his performance is much more higher than his college or colleagues. That means that he is different. And then we have big C. We all know who is the big C, which is the geniuses like Albert Einstein and other geniuses and scientists. Okay, so now we can measure the hidden potentials. Yes, we can. And this is one of the evaluation or assessment batteries called OECP, and it's produced in France. And this OECP is the creativity index for countries. And how does each country deal with this, with these capabilities? So the essence of this lecture is the equation 2 by 6 by 8, and which means 2 means the processes, divergence of exploratory thinking and convergent integrative thinking, and 6, which is thinking frames, creative thinking, critical thinking, creative problem solving, future problem solving, communication, and collaboration. In Europe, currently, these are the 6 basic frameworks that are necessary to overcome the challenge posed by diversity in order to have all of the societies merging together. So, what about the question asked by the moderator? What are the required skills? The thinking skills, productive thinking skills, are 8. So in order to, we actually adopted that there are 8 skills. These skills should be provided in a content probably the student may be aware of. Sometimes it's a new content in order to reach the knowledge production. This is a book issued in Durham University in England, because this is the university that works the most on the production of knowledge. So what are these 8 skills that we are talking about? So we have 6 frameworks, 8 skills. So we have observation, classification, comparing and contrasting, cause and effects, prediction. So regarding classification, in order the student can be able to classify, compare and contrast, do benchmarking, and that's a very important thing, because when you use the skills, this skill with other skills, you can have knowledge production. Also comparing and contrasting, and then prediction, pattern finding, planning, and judgment and decision making. These are the 8 skills. For our friends who are talking about curricula design, if we take, first of all, if we acknowledge the fact that all students are not the same, they have different potentials, then the programs should be different according to the different classifications of students that we are dealing with in schools. Because the talented student, if we provide them with modest projects, we will find that there are problems arising in the classroom. For example, they're going to be bored, they're going to be troublemakers because they're not enjoying the learning process. But for example, if there's a weak student who doesn't find any of these skills that he wants to acquire, who needs to acquire in these projects, we find the same results. So we need to think about these skills on the basis of helping the students into achieving the required level of knowledge production, not just knowledge consumption. So as for the technology aspect, as we've heard from the first session, I'm interested in 8 forms of electronic services or e-services. I've studied physics and programming, but I moved into the talented program because there has been very talented students in our classrooms who ended up with very normal jobs because the school environment and the curriculum nature did not fit their capabilities. So the services by the technology is e-learning community, because we know that technology is a huge pot or a container, but the content is what provides a deeper goal for the teachers. As you can see, they the panel chair actually talk about different dimensions when we talk about the values, about the society's desire into having a prosperous community. So e-learning is going to provide learning resources. So if these learning resources, whether electronic or paperwork, it could be provided to everyone. Now we have enrichment programs. These enrichment programs that is adequate to the students' levels. Also e-monitoring. It's also spread in Germany, because sometimes some of the professors could provide the e-monitoring, but in a remote place, and students are in a different place, but through using technology, we can have e-monitoring. Also, e-guidance and counseling. We can have a hotline using it with the students. Also, expertise and competencies, evaluation programs. Also, some we're talking about learning based on the capabilities. Tomorrow we're going to talk about learning, inquiry-based learning, problem-solving based learning, because these are directives. But for which category we need to direct these projects? We actually need to work with the above average students. So, regarding the system and the resources, this system is adopted in USA in 2005, and it's called Renzulli Learning System, which is based on the classification of students according to their level, and then they match their capabilities and the content in order to fit the content to their capabilities.
The most important thing for innovative education is to pinpoint a number of elements that shape the profile. I have no other word before the gentleman who rejected speaking in English. If we have a synonymous in Arabic for profile, we would have used it in Arabic. It means that there's an image that summarizes the entire image for the learner in terms of the learning nature and the way of expressing the level of motivation that they have, the value system that he has, and the socio-economic background of the student. If we can manage to gather all of this information and data about those different resources, definitely there will be a comprehensive full image about this learner. And therefore we can provide the educational experiences that live up to this profile. There are other technological aspects that can be used as well. In light of the profile, we can provide a host of education services that are in line with this framework. I will stick to the instructions of the panel discussion moderator. As for the national agenda for creativity and innovation incubators, what does that mean? It means that there is a target category that can be pinpointed through a quick and screening process, which enables us to build a profile. This profile can provide an image about the students who have latent capabilities and can become among the customers of those services or the beneficiaries of those services. We can provide quick programs and developed services to them that are based on training teachers and educators to learn how to deal with innovative education culture. Then we move on to the qualified categories, and they can develop content. There is no community that can develop without developing the content locally. We can learn from the global experiences, and then we need to adapt them to the local side and have the human resources that can develop the content themselves. In addition to creativity and enhancement of content in a spontaneous manner that is being dictated by the nature of productive thinking. Then we move on to the enriched content to all the students, and therefore we will have comprehensive programs that represent products for entrepreneurship, mentorship, guidance, and counseling. All of this is under the national agenda. So the national agenda summarizes all of these elements. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Taysir. He took us on a quick journey on innovative and creative educational process, which will be highly important to the audience in time of discussion, please. We have a request by the audience. Please fill in the assessment form, so we would have your opinion and your feedback on the conference. Please kindly fill in the assessment form and give it to the organizers. Now we move on to the following speaker, Dr. Michel Pasquier, Associate Professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, College of Engineering, American University of Sharjah. Dr. Michel obtained a PhD in electrical engineering in the year 1985 and a PhD in computer science in the year 1989 from Grenoble Institute Technology in France. Please, Professor.
Afternoon to all of you. First, I would like to thank the organizers, the CSSR, for inviting me here. So I'm very flattered. And also, I would like to apologize for not being able to do this talk in Arabic, but that's beyond my abilities, sorry. All right, so yeah, just as a note that I'm a computer scientist through and through. I'm not someone, educationist or otherwise. But then I've been working in AI, developing technologies and applying them for the last 30 years. And that includes a lot of areas, a lot of it in healthcare, as well as intelligent robotics and transportation, and also education, a lot of that. Mostly working with primary schools and so on. So this talk is intended to be an overview of what kind of technologies we have in AI and how they can, enhance education. All right, so firstly, some quick observation. The idea that people may have of AI or how it is used may not quite be very obvious. So if you look at classrooms of the old days and even of today's classroom, it would seem there's not much that has changed, at first glance, right? The same process. In particular, I should say the same constraint that you have one teacher for, maybe 20, 30, 40 students. So this is a far stretch from the one-to-one interaction that we would strive for, right? On the other hand, sure, things have improved. We have better props. We use multimedia and so on. Of course, a more modern version, a view of the classroom might be this one, where now you have, you replace the old notebooks by tablets and so on, which can be used not just for note-taking or assessment, but to stream multimedia, for simulation, for interactive work, and so on. So this is a big improvement, but there's still no AI or really intelligence there of any kind, really. So some people might have this vision, I hope it's not the case of most, but this vision of a classroom where people use virtual reality. So I'm sure you heard about that. Virtual reality has a lot of good applications, especially for immersive experience, very relevant in domains like physics and many others, all right? But of course, this is not something we can use on a daily basis, and it's just the surface of things, okay? Likewise, you might think of this classroom like in Taiwan, where they have actually a robotic teaching assistant standing there in front of the kids and delivering, the class, etc. And they typically like it, at least for a while. But again, this is the surface of things, right? AI is way beyond all these gimmicks. AI is something which is more subtle and even invisible, okay? These are things inside the box that you don't really see, that you're not aware of at first glance, all right? Now, okay, let's quickly go through AI is basically a mixture of engineering and science. On the engineering side, of course, we strive to build intelligent systems, machines that can help us in many areas. So briefly, I can't go possibly through all of this because it would take the day, but okay, for instance, robots. In the previous slide, I was showing you a possible teaching assistant, which is a humanoid robot. Sure, this is one possible direction, okay? There are pros and cons to that, but Just to mention, this is actually one of the hardest endeavor for AI, to build a machine that looks and behaves, and interacts with other humans just like we do. This is very difficult. Even if you think of a computer-based system with a screen, tablet and otherwise, and students interact with that, a very important point is that we need to have what we call a humane interface. That is something which is not, like text-based or boring to use, but again, something that reacts and interacts with the students in a very similar way to a human teacher would. This is very important. This is about engagement. This is about motivation. Okay, it has to be appealing and easy to use and so on. In fact, it has to be better than, a human teacher. Then, okay, briefly, there are many, the point is that there are many relevant, technologies that we have in AI that are directly applicable to several fields of education. If you think of decision support and planning, etc., well, it has direct application to things like curriculum planning, or, how to deliver the content of the course, how to chunk it into digestible bits and figure out in which order, based on prerequisites and so on and so forth. So a lot of this have been done. Likewise, there's a lot of work in, in machine learning. This is the rage these days, and you hear a lot about diagnosis and prediction, etc. All these technologies can be used, again, to assess, the current, for instance, level of understanding of a student, to predict how well he or she will understand the next material, and even go all the way to predict possible risk of failures, which means, of course, which implies to take preventive actions to do better. Now, one interesting point as well is that when you look at the fundamentals of AI, well, it's about building machines that exhibit, a level of intelligence comparable to what we have. To do that, we need, and people have done that 60 years ago and all the way since, we have to understand what intelligence is in the first place. How does it work? That is, how people go about learning. How do we go about problem solving, about making decisions, about using the knowledge that we have? This is the essence of AI. So we use it all the time. But what's very interesting is that, of course, it directly relates to education, because to build an intelligent teaching assistant, we precisely need to understand how the student is learning, which parts are problematic, which are not, and so on and so forth, right? So I find there's a particular, of all the possible fields that AI can be applied to, in my opinion, there's a very strong, correlation, a very strong tie with education, because of this common interest in understanding intelligence and the learning process and so on. And this goes all the way to understanding emotions and so on and so forth. Okay, briefly about the state of the art. Okay, I could pick any areas, but if you think of games, for instance, from the beginning, it's been a benchmark for AI people to build systems that can mimic human, or do better than humans in many areas. Games has been, for many reasons, a popular area. So we had to wait more than 50 years, and that's until 1997, to see an AI finally do better than humans at a game like chess, which is not a small endeavor. And then we had to wait another 20 years or so to find to find an AI which is able to compete on the same level as a world champion in a game which is very difficult, which is that of Go. And okay, what I want to point out is that those are very interesting achievements, but in a way they are not that hard, because what they are missing, what they don't need, is the human interaction, okay? On the other hand, if you look at the also recent achievement, which is IBM Watson, which I'm sure you heard about, IBM Watson was initially used to play the game of Jeopardy, and it was successful at beating humans in that game. But the very important difference that IBM Watson has compared to the other systems I just mentioned is that one of the key capability is human interaction, okay? The game is based on question and answers. So the system has to be able to understand all kind of questions asked in natural language, in English in that case, right? And likewise, it has to be able to produce an answer, a meaningful answer in the same language. And of course, in between, it has to scout for information, assimilate a lot of knowledge, and make a synthesis and come up with a correct answer. So that is an achievement in order of magnitude, larger than whatever was done before. And of course, next thing, what Watson did is, what IBM did is they realized this, of course, the same system can be used in many areas, can be deployed in many areas, and it's not limited to games or otherwise, right? And next thing they did is develop this basically intelligent doctor, right? That is extremely powerful for the reason, well, like I said, because it's extremely gifted at understanding language and communicating with people, but also it's a matter of scale. It's able to process millions of books literally in just a few hours or even less. So basically it's able to process knowledge and in a fraction of the time that it takes us to do. So this is why this is a major achievement. And of course, it's not only applicable to a medical domain, right? You realize that what we have here is some kind of cognitive engine, intelligent system that can be used in many domains. It's just a matter of switching the domain, the kind of information you're using, right? Switch from medical to, I don't know, history or to, any domain you want, right? And so instead of being used by doctors, next they can be used by teachers, they can be used in other fields as well. Likewise, after 50, 60 years of AI, we find there are breakthrough of late that really takes us to the next level. And one of them is in also text processing. This is very important. I mean, if you think of teachers and the time we spend, to basically take a textbook or whatever, and out of that we have to create slides, we have to create material, exercises, assessment, and so on and so forth. This is taking an enormous amount of time, right? And of course, grading and all these activities. So if you have an AI that can basically help with that, right? By being able, for instance, to take the content of the book and, again, digest this in chunks of knowledge and figure out in which order this should be presented to the student, and then be able to understand their answers and assess the quality, right? Whether correct or not, to which extent, and so on and so forth. So this is what we need, really, to develop intelligent systems in education. And so recent achievements in that area have been really a big improvement, okay? You see, for instance, AI systems being able to summarize automatically articles, to produce even articles from scratch based on key ideas and so on. So there are still many issues, obviously, but this is major breakthrough, and that will help us tremendously to build those intelligent tutoring systems and so on that we need. This is not new. People have been working on that for 30 years, but there is really, of late, really many achievements that take us to a level where those systems are really applicable now in the real world, and they are. And you find many systems if you go online, and many companies many startups all the time that are using those tools. Okay, moving on. This is another example. Well, at first glance, it's not about education. This one is about the first robot lawyer. But why I'm bringing this up is because, as well, it's a very recent achievement that shows how far we've gone into understanding natural language and being able to interact with people in a very natural way. Okay, this is based actually on dialogue. This is the key point here, right? And when you know teaching and pedagogy, you know that there is one style of teaching which is inquiry teaching, or sometimes a Socratic dialogue, which is based entirely on this kind of interaction, purely question answers between teachers and students, right? This is one style among many. But it turns out this is also what we need on a daily basis to understand what a student knows or what he doesn't know, understand answers to exercises and assess their quality and so on. Okay, so this is exactly the kind of tool that we develop for intelligent education tools as well. Okay, very briefly, we hear a lot about, AI being everywhere, replacing everybody, the automation of work, right? Endless books are being written about the rise of the robots, the fourth industrial revolution, and so on and so forth. So you can find all this on the web and elsewhere. The point is, yes, technology is changing at almost an exponential pace. The application of AI and so-called big data and machine learning and so on are making a tremendous breakthrough in every area of society and industry and so on, right? Okay. If you look at statistics on the web from reputable organizations, including Gartner and everything, you find that, yes, most jobs are being computerized slowly. If you look more into the details, you will see that, of course, those jobs which require a higher level of education are those which are the least likely to be automated, to be replaced by an AI. That's fairly obvious, right? But then again, it's changing very fast. So there are two interesting points here, is that on the one hand, we need to adapt education to these new technologies, to those massive changes they make into society and our daily lives and etc., to prepare people for the future, for the workplace of tomorrow, right? But the flip side of the coin is that we need also to make use of all these new technologies to improve the education process itself, okay? So this is why it's a very interesting area of AI in education. If you wonder, those skills which are precisely very hard to automate are, of course, all these related to, you see the list here from the World Economic Forum 2016, everything related to complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity. All these are those we know which are very hard for AI to handle and to build in a machine, etc. But like I said earlier, there are also those very skills that we need to understand in order to understand the learning process and how students are processing information and how we go about teaching them in the first place and assessing their performance, their progress, and so on and so forth. So it's a very much a two-sided process here. Just moving on, if you look at those statistics about the automation of teaching, now that's very interesting. This is a table which shows the risk, the likelihood of any areas to be fully automated like now. Of course, on the one hand, you see fields like sales or maybe plant and machine operatives. These are very routine jobs which don't require much problem solving, that a very high chance of being automated. On the other hand, you see very interestingly, for instance, that the least at-risk professions are related to healthcare and etc. Basically, areas where humans are very important, and we need definitely, we cannot have machines taking care 100% of the process. And then second least risk profession is precisely teaching and educational business with a very low 4%. The reason is very simple. It's because these are labor intensive, but more importantly, these are jobs with a very high level of creative task, non-routine, very hard to automate, and also where human interaction, natural language processing, social skills are very, very important. And as I said, they are the ones which are the hardest to automate in a machine, right? But then again, flip side is that, well, as you know, there's a very high cost, right? When you, the reason why you have, for instance, only one teacher in a class of 30 or 40 students is because we just cannot afford to have one teacher taking care of 10 students or 5 students, etc. It's not possible, okay? So this is where automation is needed, okay, to improve the productivity, and the quality of the process. To reach that elusive one-to-one interaction between teacher and student, we need to automate a great part of the process, and we need to use technology for that, and in particular AI technology. Okay. So these are some of the key points that people in working in AI with education try to address. Well, on the right, it's the classic dichotomy between first industrial revolution and all the way to what we are facing now, the fourth industrial revolution. These are massive changes. The fact that before everything was in the hand of the expert, and now because knowledge is distributed and available freely, we think more of facilitating the learning process. The fact that precisely everything was before in the hands of the teacher, but now anybody can really learn on their own, at their own pace, using widely available resources.
وأصبحت الموارد متوفرة.
The learning process has moved from the physical classroom to basically anytime, anywhere. People can learn at home, can learn on the go, as and when they feel like it. So many changes that impact the learning process dramatically, and we have to cope with that, okay? And again, some of the key points is that, yes, we have to develop technology that helps us to close that growing skills gap, to provide universal access, as I was pointing out, to education. We need to design, to change the way the content, right? The learning content is being disseminated, in which order, quantity, etc., to cope with the mobile learner. By mobile learner, here again, we mean somebody who learns as and when they please, at home, on the go, still maybe in a classroom occasionally. We have to address the issue of sharing information, of collaborative learning. It's we know it's very effective to have students who work in groups and help each other. It increases their ability to learn, and etc. And at the end of the day, again, it boils down to the ability to deliver personalized, self-paced learning on a one-to-one basis to the student. This is something that we cannot achieve with human teachers alone. We need to have intelligent assistants to help with that. How much of it is still a debate, right? But as an AI practitioner, we are striving to automate as much as we can as possible. Okay, so this is the key idea, just some quotation to highlight. But yes, in a few more years, and by the way, this quote, this is a quotation that comes from the 60s, about 50.
Dr. Michel.
Yes, sorry.
You have 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, the idea that we have to go toward personalized education. So, okay, let me skip that and show you, sorry, just since I have 1 minute, just to show you what is the core of really, when we say AI of education, there are many aspects to it. I mentioned natural language processing, I mentioned virtual reality, I mentioned many of those, but at the core, right, the core of it, when we say intelligent teaching assistant, this is a system that is basically like the following. It consists of different modules. The domain model is flexible. This is the content, right? You want to teach geometry, you have the information in that module. You want to teach the history of the UAE, you have a module for that, right? Then you have the pedagogical model. This is where we have the arsenal of teaching techniques, how to deliver information, how to assess the student's level of understanding, and etc. All these, right? All the tools that educationists know very well, but now in a computer form, algorithms that run this automatically as and when needed. Okay? And then on the other hand, we have the learner model. Now that is the student. This is all the information we have about the student, what they like, they don't like, what they know, what they don't know, the kind of mistakes they make, their strengths and weaknesses, everything. And this is being updated on a continuous basis as we interact with the student and evaluate their abilities. So when we say AI in education, this is it. This is the algorithms, the system that take all this, and basically it's a closed loop system where we repeatedly deliver the information, right? Teach what the student is supposed to learn, and then we assess how well that went or not, right? We provide exercises, we ask questions, the student answers, the student solves problems, builds projects, etc. And this mass of information that is being collected is used to evaluate how the learning is going, and we dynamically adjust delivery of information, the choice of relevant exercises, etc. All this is dynamically adjusted on the fly based on the assessment. And this is the strength of such systems, because you see, instead of having the same teaching methodology for all the 40 students in the class, now we are able to deliver tailored learning mechanism, right? We assess on a one-to-one basis, and every student will have a different learning pace. Every student will be presented with different information, different exercises based on their needs, okay? And this is the promise, this is the goal of AI in education, is to deliver such systems. All right. So if you're curious, since I'm out of time, just to mention, you can find on the web, for instance, many examples of such systems. Typically, they are used in primary school mostly because it's easier to deliver this kind of system and educational technology at lower level, right, where it's easier. So think of a simple, mathematics, geometry, geography, history, chemistry, all these basics as taught in primary school. But the latest trend, just so you know, the latest trend is, of course, to move toward a higher level of education, even university, and then lifelong learning, because at the end of the day, it's the same kind of technique we can apply. It's just a matter of adapting the content, right, to the audience, to the learner, as well as adapting the algorithms we are using, the technology, to their individual needs and so on, okay? So there's a huge boost nowadays in such systems which are really available in many domains. And this is a dramatic change we are seeing, and I think in the next 10 years, people will be able to, to learn on their own very easily. Just pick a subject you want and do it. Okay, so sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. نشكر.
Thank you, Dr. Michel Pascal. He spoke about the education and artificial intelligence technology and the relationship between them. The final speaker of today is Dr. Nisreen Hamad, advisor to the Ministry of Education. Dr. Nisreen Hamad has a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from Liverpool University in the UK. Later on, she joined Duke University in the United States to work as a molecular cancer biology researcher. Please, Doctor, the floor is yours. She's going to talk about education outputs and the future jobs in the UAE vision. Peace be upon you all. I'm the final speaker for today's session. I have a lot to do, and I'm gonna give you an award, which is I'm going to avoid speaking as much as possible for the fourth revolution, because I believe that you have a sufficient dose of speaking about it this morning. So I would like to start by thanking ECSSR for their kind invitation, and I would like to tackle from this session about the UAE and continue what my colleagues have been talking about regarding the future in all its areas. So I promised you, but I would like just to show you this picture, because as you can see, since we started talking and discussing this morning, and what we read from the newspapers and from various readings, that the future shows that it shows that there might be a conflict between human beings and machines because of the huge developments in the automation, AI, technological development, and likewise of technological developments in the fourth industrial revolution. There's going to be real conflict over jobs. We have a lot of information from our colleagues this morning, so I'm just going to avoid it. I'm just going to avoid repeating it, but I am one of the optimists who believe that no one can replace what Allah have created or God was created, which is the human being. So the machine is going to remain a machine, a human being is going to remain a human being. Yes, they are going to dominate in certain jobs, but they will never be able to compete in jobs that is depending on emotion, intelligence, and intuition and creativity. So according to the schedule or the table shown by the president, by my colleague, it shows that the jobs depending on emotional intelligence and creativity and intuition is going to be protected from automation. And I was really glad about the discussion conducted earlier about ethics, because even machines need an ethical framework that is only going to be provided through human beings. We have two truths that any country needs to look at with extreme attention, which is the first one is that we have ambiguity surrounding the future. And the other reality is that there are great opportunities offered by the future. Any country who would like to keep or preserve a place for it in the future is required to study and prepare for the future. The best option is to put the challenges and opportunities and surprises ahead of us. Therefore, we have a scientific forecasting of the future. So the United Arab Emirates does not only seek to have a place among the future countries or even the current present countries, but from what we see, we find that there is always a will that the UAE would be always ranked number one. So there is no wonder that even before talking about educational outcomes, that we need to look at the higher vision that is governing all of the initiatives inside the country and as well as the policies. So UAE has a centennial plan to celebrate the UAE, and we have a national plan and a national strategy and agenda for foreseeing the future and for the fourth industrial revolution. So if we look closely at the UAE strategy for the fourth industrial revolution, of course its aim is to achieve happiness and prosperity to human beings, and it's tackling the human being in the future. I'd like to recommend you all to read the future, because because it's opening the doors for the futures. It will open new world, and it shows that there is awareness within the leadership about this important topic. Also, if we look at the strategy, it shows that the road is clear ahead of us, which is it's the only road for human happiness is through the human being himself. So there is no wonder education is a basic component and a focal component in all of the plans, because as you can see, all of the short-term plans for 2021 or even the long-term plans 2071, this element is present. So whenever we look at foreseeing the future plans, we always find that education holds an important place. And that's very important because the human capital is the only capital that is capable of achieving dreams, and through preparing it in order to achieve this prosperous future is a fundamental thing. So education, what is the type of education that would lead us to the future? My colleagues, of course, spoke a lot about the current reality that there is already a generation who have available information everywhere. So we need to transfer the student from just a consumer into a creator of knowledge, into being able to analyze such knowledge. And also the students should be able to have the lifelong learning and not just forget what they have learned and learn 3 new things, but also develop what he have learned. Of course, the future education is going to be an individual one, because currently we probably won't be able to design or tailor education for each student, but probably in the future we will be. Therefore, we need to concentrate on the education based on skills, intellectual and emotional capabilities. So we would like to transform education into not just something happening in the classroom, but also happening all over the school and in the entire society in general. Also through using learning technologies, the project-based learning, evaluation-based learning as well, an evaluation project assessment as well. So in order to transform the teacher into a facilitator and not just an expert providing information, and that is through continuous development, analysis, and follow-up and monitoring. I would like to show this slide in English, and I'll tell you why. I believe that this image shows a summary of what should the student would graduate with, or the skills that the student would graduate with, which is the skills that our colleagues were speaking about, the digital skills, the personal skills, job-specific skills, and thinking skills. I believe that if the learning system outcomes are based on these elements, we are going to do well, and we will save a very prosperous place for our kids in the future and in the job market. Of course, the Emirati school was, of course, gaining a lot of attention. I'm not going to be speaking much about it because we have a lot of presentations in other events across the world, but the Emirati school is in the education system in general. I'm just going to give you a few some of the things that we are doing, some of the initiatives, general features of the curricula, teacher training and development in the frame of what we have been speaking about, which is the education that ought to be in the future. The first one, in the past of the Emirati school, is increasing with time. And that is with the goal to provide each student an educational path that helps with their needs. We have added the elite path for the talented students, and we have also the specialized path for those who would like to complete their education process in a specific profession or vocational manner. Also, we have the creative arts path, and also we have under the academic or the Emirati school, and that of course is the applied technology schools, and of course other technical applied schools that is focusing on these fields. As for continuous learning, there is a holistic approach under the Emirati school that is interested in developing the learning in techniques and developing competitiveness between the employees in the workplace, and that's a holistic approach that is actually going through all of the individuals in the UAE. It's a very important approach to prepare the work environment for the future. When you talk about the curricula, in the Emirati school is something also covered in many aspects, also through the media as well. I would like to attract your attention to the things underlined here. These are the reference aspects for the development of the Emirati schools. For of course, if we're going to talk about the future, if we're going to talk about knowledge-based economy and the 21st century skills and stream and cross-discipline teaching, and the teacher, the student as the center of the academic or the educational process, there has been a study that says that it's very important for the students to receive the education of the liberal art. They shouldn't just be specialized, but they should be they have knowledge in several disciplines and not specific one. So I'm not just going to tackle all of them. I'm just going to tackle two of them. Because I would like to clarify. Usually in this conference, we find a lot of passion. We have a sense of jealousy for the Arabic language. So whenever we speak in the ministry, and of course His Excellency Marwan is here, we always concentrate and focus on the identity, the national identity, and the Arabic curriculum. And of course the work done for the Arabic curriculum is very important, and also changing the work from on social studies into changing it from a boring subject into an interesting one is also done through very important efforts and very wonderful efforts. So now I'm going to talk about digital literacy and digital skills. I would like to show you what the students are learning here today in grade 9 and grade 10. We're talking about programming. So students in computer science in the Emirati school, they don't just learn Microsoft Office on doing analysis through Excel, with all due respect to such skills, but we are now focusing on networking and programming. We highly concentrate on programming. Students are studying about AI, studying the 10th grade, and we started to develop their skills through presenting to curricula of innovative and creative design. So the students will continue in grade 10 and 12 in very elevated applications, talking about translation, AI, and also ethical manners related to the usage of computer and benefiting from it. So technology is not really exclusive to high school students. Actually, students in grade 3 will start to learn or present such concepts about design and technology in a very advanced manner. And by the way, all of the students, regardless of their capabilities, they are enjoying it to the most, especially these two subjects. As I mentioned, education and skills should never be exclusive to the curricula or to the grade, but an entire holistic approach has been developed to developing of the students and their skills that pays into consideration communication, collaboration, technology, innovation, and so on and so forth within the classwork. And of course, mentoring and vocational and academic mentoring is also a very important aspect in providing support, parallel support to the students, so that they'd be able to decide on their own what could they be in the future and what could they do in order to prepare to become whatever they need to be in the future?
There are a number of initiatives in this regard, and when I talk about teachers, we always talk about developing teachers' skills. Everybody in the UAE knows that about the professional development programs submitted to teachers, targeting teachers, but there are many focuses on professional education groups. So there are these programs that that's why we focus on the classroom teaching and so on. So currently we are working diligently on transforming schools into a professional development unit as a whole, so that teachers would be able to work collaboratively to achieve the students' best interest. There is also the educational learning platform, which is not based on artificial intelligence, and we are using technology extensively. As for students and teachers, there is also the education data at the Ministry of Education, which is considered the first of its kind in the region. The key objective is to obtain data and transform them into useful insights for decision makers and for teachers and school principals. Even when it comes to higher education, we have major developments with regards to the deliverables of the education system, which is not related to general education as well. We are looking at the higher education strategy as an attempt to achieve full understanding of the educational process, to achieve efficiency and to enhance creativity. And I will not take up too much time to focus on them. That is why I want to return to a number of points that we have been talking about since the morning. First, I don't see any possibility for replacing teachers in the future. This is impossible. It cannot be done. Teachers cannot be replaced. We may have assistant teachers, as mentioned by the professor a short while ago, but all teachers should know that their roles have changed completely, and they should be more open-minded for the transformation of the roles and to be ready to be facilitators of knowledge. And this requires additional knowledge from them. Knowledge is available whether at the content level or even at the pedagogy approaches. One of the challenges that we face not only in the UAE but in the Arab world as a whole, it is great to have a list of the skills that are called higher thinking skills, higher communication skills, and so on. But the integration of those skills into the curricula is not an easy task. It is not easy, not just with regards to curricula. It is also difficult with regards to teaching those skills. It is also not easy in terms of measurement. They cannot be easily measured. How can we determine that we will have a standard measurement to ensure that this student can solve a problem? The work should not be focused on this in the UAE because we focus on international experiences in this regard. Secondly, this image, as you have seen here, who could teach them? You will see under this title of who could teach them, there are different roles for the community to be part of the education process to obtain the education deliverables. Education is available everywhere and it should not be restricted to schools. The society teaches, parents teach. If parents are not open-minded to higher thinking skills and only perceive of education as a number of easy or difficult mathematical problems, we will not have higher thinking skills. You have 1 minute left. Okay. This is a complete societal role, and everybody should be fully aware and should fully comprehend and be capable of working towards those deliverables in education to teach for our students as well. The comprehensive character that we talk about when we talk about skills, it should never make us or let us undermine or underestimate the knowledge-based study. Students should study math and physics. However, the issue is how they study. How can they study these subjects? There has to be a balance between the skill and personal development and comprehensive development, and what can be, or what the knowledge itself should have, the content in terms of the development of the skills and student skills. I do believe that we are moving in the right direction. I believe that there's always great attention to what is going on around us, and I believe that we are content. And here I'm not talking about just this point. As part of the developing the educational system in the UAE, I believe we are moving on the right track, and we need to be fully aware of all the determining elements such as the identity, the knowledge depth, and the skills depth as well. Thank you very much, and I hope I wish you all the best.
شكرا دكتورة على هذا.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this wonderful lecture. Now I'd like to open the floor for another 5 minutes of questions, if we have any questions by the audience.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Peace be with all of you. I am Dr. Ahmed Dabbagh. I have 2 questions. First, Dr. Nasreen, it was really a surprise when you have openly said that we will be fine when the deliverables of education are linked to the labor market and the process of linking this to the students' study. This is actually a core subject of and the core problem of the education system. We cannot assess the deliverables or outcomes of education as benchmark to the outcomes of the or requirements of labor market, because the fourth industrial revolution is requiring skills that are not really within the scope of current education system. Does the UAE, represented in the Ministry of Education, does it take this into consideration? We are talking about changing an educational system. We will be fine if the deliverables are okay, but do we really have any tangible concept of how we can change the deliverables and outcomes of the education process the way we do in Finland and in Singapore? They change it within 4 months, the entire education system. They started from the top one, they are the top 1 and 2 worldwide. This is my first question. The second question, as for the skills, we already know that these are the 4 key skills which are under 2 umbrellas: soft skills and hard skills. The hard skills, everything that has to do with technical and digitalization, technical aspects, and things that have to do with the life skills. But for the soft skills, they are the core. How can I overcome a machine in 20 years time from now? The machine will defeat me technologically. No way out of that. But is this taken into account in the soft skill or the hard skill in the education system? Thank you.
الموضوع مش صراحة.
Actually, it's not about being frank or candid or not. Any sound education system need to have a sound set of deliverables. But I don't like to pass judgment on the outcomes of the education system in that they are not aligned with our expectations. The change that happened in education is a radical change that has taken into account all of the things that you have mentioned, such as the labor market, the depth of knowledge, the soft skills, the hard skills. All of this already was done 4 years ago. So the measurement of success or failure of any education system cannot be completed within this short time frame. So through the standard tests, we have the standard tests in the UAE. There is the Emirates standard test. Yes, there is improvement. Universities tell us that there is an improvement. Yes, but we need to give education its full ability and its full potential to discuss this point. And I agree with you on soft skills. And if you pay attention to that for this subjects, The 21st century skills are critical to introducing the curricula that are being introduced currently and the ones that are being in development all the time. Development is happening all the time to introduce new skills and new concepts. We do understand that there is a kind of frustration. There is frustration in the system because of some deliverables of education. Yet, there are massive efforts underway, whether at the level of the curricula or assessment or students' innovation skills through extracurricular activities and by developing teacher skills. With some patience, we will see these efforts bearing fruit. We need to be able to be a little bit patient to see the full outcome. This does not mean that the students who passed the system or graduated from the system are facing critical problems. No, some gaps were addressed in the foundational groups. However, but the situation is not that bad compared to many of the education systems we see in other countries. We are very advanced and we are making more progress. We are advanced and we make more progress. We are not accepting the status quo. The same way the Singaporeans are moving on to competency-based education. Competency-based education requires massive changes. We may be moving in that direction. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you in brief. One more question. Okay. My name is Sana Abbas from Sorbonne University in Abu Dhabi. I would like to thank you and thank the ECSSR for the wonderful benefits that we obtained from this conference. In brief, in light of the supremacy of technology, everybody is talking about innovation, creativity, and the fourth industrial revolution. And in front of this massive flow of information, which some people may perceive as a willingness to change and transform mentalities towards a certain direction that is aligned with the countries where this technology originated. My question to Ms. Nisreen, how can this topic be taken into account in terms of the curricula so we'd be able to empower students with tools that enable them to combat or reveal or uncover misinformation and misinformed rhetoric and all the other elements that may undermine their identity and mentality? Do we have the ability to take this into account? How can we monitor, discover, and unveil these campaigns of misinformation based on this technology? Thank you. It's a wonderful question. But I hope I had the curricula today to show you some of the aspects that answer this question. As you have kindly mentioned, Doctor, the most important element is to empower students to be able to find on their own and to read the tweet, read whatever they read, and have the ability to filter them internally. This is done basically by bolstering the sense of belonging and identity and the values that are latent within the community. This requires Islamic studies curriculum and Arabic language curriculum, social studies. All of these curricula are based not on memorization of texts and school books and answers to questions. They are based on the students' ability to reach those conclusions. The pedagogical approach to those topics are the ones that help students to filter those things that are happening around them, as you have said, is happening in a massive manner around them. And students should be able to analyze students. Now, the Arabic language is being taught through literature and not through memorization of rules. You read texts, and those texts are live texts. Many of them are live literary texts by writers in the UAE that relate to complex social issues. Students need to read them from their own perspective and answer these questions freely. And here the teacher turns into a facilitator for this discussion to steer it in the right way. In social studies, most of the topics have to do with underscoring national identity, whether the textbooks that have to do with the history of the UAE or global history. There is full understanding that and full awareness that there have to be protection of the national identity and underscoring the language and protecting it, and protection of the Islamic values, which represent the core values for these aspects. Thank you, Doctor. One last question. Peace be with you. First, I would like to express my appreciation to all the speakers who have enlightened us. And my name is Dr. Ali Al-Amoudi. I am a previous counselor to the UN in the field of sustainable development. And I have two questions. The first question is, the Emirate of Dubai initiated a certain initiative to teach teachers or train teachers. Teachers should be taught, the educators should be taught based on 6 key factors, which include well-being, sustainability, children, education. Those 6 elements for every single educator in the Emirate of Dubai should be fully aware of them and take a license for them. Otherwise, he will not be considered a teacher within the educational framework of Dubai. My first question to Dr. Nisreen: will this approach be implemented at the federal level, including Abu Dhabi and other Emirates? My second question is a nationwide question. I was one of the early councillors for sustainable development at the United Nations, which we started in the 1990s when the world changed, by integrating economic development and ecological environment within a certain system that is fully comprehensive, which is called sustainable development. Now, the international approach and the strategic approaches are based on this sustainable development concept. So the United Arab Emirates has been taking the lead for the Arab world and the MENA region. The Vision 2021 was based on this approach, sustainability in all sectors. My question is, the educational sector
وأشار لها معالي الوزير وأشرتم لها أنتم في خلال هذا التغيير.
Throughout this big change in the finding of these educational developments and compared to the different inputs, are they aligned with the international system that pinpointed 17 sustainable development objectives worldwide by the end of 2030, which is called the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, which are the 17 goals, including the education process, change, and innovation and creativity? Have we introduced in our systems and in our curricula, introducing those topics? Since I am, thank God, in the UAE and fully engaged with this, I've seen that there's some kind of knowledge, or let's say there's some kind of shortage in understanding the legislators and the community in terms of full awareness of this, and they have started feeding this into the education system. The SDGs, yes. This is my question, and thank you very much.
دكتور نسرين السؤال الأول.
Dr. Nisreen, the first question regarding what you said about the education of teachers, I believe you are talking about some part of the licensing for the teachers. This is a national project including all of the teachers in the UAE, whether they are in the government, the public sector or the private sector, that started last year with a series of
tests and assessment in the content subjects, and the second cycle and third cycle has been concluded this year. Yes, each teacher in the UAE within a span of probably 2 years, the most, should be licensed to become a teacher. This is not something new. This is actually applied in all of the countries around the world. So regarding the coming phase of the licensing process is the vocational training required, so that the teachers within all the six aspects that you mentioned are meeting all of the requirements. And yes, all of the teachers are going to receive this training, whether knowledge of the subject matter or the strategies of learning and the methodology of learning, and according to their results they are going to get the licensing of becoming a teacher. And this is applied to all the teachers, not just the teachers in Dubai, and that of course with the aim of elevating the quality of teaching in the UAE. Regarding the SDGs, I believe that our curricula contains a lot of the goals of the Vision 2030, and of course UAE is the regional member in UNESCO, and of course we have the office of UNESCO in Ajman, and they are doing a lot of work, and there's a lot of cooperation between the UAE and UNESCO. And I believe that part of the things mentioned in the agenda are currently evident in our curricula, whether in the social studies or sciences, or a part of the student requirements for reading. So before we conclude, allow me to just ask a question to Dr. Taysir. Thanks to Allah, we live in the UAE. Now, the fourth industrial revolution, the future, artificial intelligence, we're experiencing it here daily, on a daily basis in the UAE. Actually, the future, we are living in it now. We can say that. So my question for Dr. Taysir, with these different revolutions and these projects and innovative education, the one that you were talking about. So how could these development in technology help the teacher, and what is required from the teacher as a human element or human individual who leads this process? We believe that the teacher is a facilitator to facilitate the educational process for the students, and at the same time he is considered a leader. But what is happening now in Germany, France, and Europe, and especially in Finland, they have a pre-characterization of the teachers in order to know about their capabilities, because since we have differences between students, there's also differences between teachers, and that of course would measure the way they deliver the information and how to facilitate the students' education according to their own capabilities. Also regarding the development of the curriculum and the way of interaction with students, on how to deliver the information and the whole ecological environment, that is of course given to the teacher through workshops and training workshops. Therefore, we have there is the capacity building done throughout their career, and even before joining the career of being a teacher, there is a stage teachers go through from preparation and readiness stage. Even in Germany, when you tomorrow listen to the speaker from Germany, any teacher regarding his degree, once they enter the lecture hall, they have to learn about pedagogy and how to deal with kids and so on and so forth. So the final point I would like to ask, second what you were saying, that of course the UAE is always pioneer in thinking about the future and following new trends, and of course this conference is an evidence to that. But when we're talking about this revolution, we need to think about the task force for the revolution. We need to think about the human capital who are capable of making this revolution, the fourth or the fifth, come true. Therefore, these hidden talents and powers, we need to know about it early on. I'm not talking about ordinary or average human beings. I'm speaking about those who are capable of making a change in the society, whether from a technical level or an educational level or a pedagogical level, are a very specific category about people who have specific mental capabilities. Therefore, we find countries like Germany, Finland, and other countries, they pay a lot of attention to such a category of students, and also their work with these students, it actually elevates the entire educational system. Therefore, the teacher should be very much aware of the type of skills and capabilities, because of course they have vocational capabilities, they have educational capabilities, and they have social capabilities. So if we elevate the status of the teacher from a social level in a way that is equal to their educational level, we will change the way they think, because the teacher should know that they have a social responsibility, not just within the classroom. They have also the responsibility to teach them about loyalty and national identity, as well as teaching them about the subjects. To conclude, I would like to thank the speakers, and I wish you all a very pleasant day. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you all. Thank you for all of the participants in this session. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, by this we conclude the first day of the 9th education conference, annual education conference, and I would like to extend thanks to His Excellency Jamal Sanad al-Suwaidi, Director General of the ECSSR, and I would like to thank you all for attending. Now I would like to invite you to have lunch with us in the cafeteria of the center. We'll see you tomorrow to resume the remaining sessions of the conference. Thank you very much for your attendance. Peace be upon you all.